Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Spiritual Edition. And today we're continuing our reading of Flow by Mihaly C. I call him Mr. C. Mr. C. And yeah, this book was inspired by an animated film that I watched with my friend Marina. Big shout out to Marina earlier this year. And it won the Best Picture Academy Award for animated film. So congratulations. Now, I don't think the film has anything to do with the book, but it just has the same name. So I thought it was interesting. Anyways, so you could check it out in the description box below. It's not in the theaters anymore, so it's streaming, I don't know, somewhere in the ether. But you guys can check out the animated film's official website and watch it. It's very, very, very good. I'm not much of an animated film kind of person, but this one is very well done. So, anyways, well, let's do it then. We will be reading chapter 10, and this will be part one. And in the meantime, you can check out our other book clubs. We have our spiritual book clubs on Monday, which is the category that this book falls under. And then we have our health book clubs on Wednesdays and financial book clubs on Thursdays. So they're all on YouTube. We're starting on two new books in August, which is a couple weeks from now. And that's the spiritual book club. We're starting a new book on that because we're finishing up this book. And then on Wednesdays, we're starting a new health book club because we're finishing that book. So check it out. It's all on our website. Also, check out our newsletters and podcasts and merch. And if you're in the LA area, Los Angeles area, come check out our center, Healing Center with Scalar Technologies. So, okay, that's enough of that. Let's do it. Let me move the camera in a little bit. If you have a book, you can, oops, sorry about that. You can follow with us there. If not, you can follow with us in our camera. Okay, chapter 10. This is part one. The making of meaning. Oh, let me move that just a little closer here. Okay. It is not unusual for famous tennis players to be deeply committed to their game, to take pleasure in playing, but off the court to be morose and hostile. Picasso enjoyed painting, but as soon as he laid down his brushes, he turned into a rather unpleasant man. Bobby Fischer, the chess genius, appeared to be helplessly inept, except when his mind was on chess. These and countless similar examples are a reminder that having achieved flow in one activity does not necessarily guarantee that it will be carried over to the rest of life. If we enjoyed work and friendships and faced every challenge as an opportunity to develop new skills, we would be getting rewards out of living that are outside the realm of ordinary life. Yet even this would not be enough to assure us of optimal experience. As long as enjoyment follows piecemeal from activities not linked to one another in a meaningful way, one is still vulnerable to the vagaries of chaos. Even the most successful career, the most rewarding family relationship eventually runs dry. Sooner or later, involvement in work must be reduced. Spouses die, children grow up and move away. To approach optimal experience as closely as is humanly possible, the last step in the control of consciousness is necessary. And that's just the law of cycles, isn't it? Careers come and go, relationships come and go, kids grow up and they move out and things like that. It's all known as the law of cycles. What this involves is turning all life into a unified flow experience. If a person sets out to achieve a difficult enough goal from which all other goals logically follow, and if he or she invests all energy in developing skills to reach that goal, then actions and feelings will be in harmony. And the separate parts of life will fit together, and each activity will make sense in the present, as well as in view of the past and of the future. In such a way, it is possible to give meaning to one's entire life. But isn't it incredibly naive to expect life to have a coherent overall meaning? After all, at least since Nietzsche concluded that God was dead, philosophers and social scientists have been busy demonstrating that existence has no purpose, that chance and impersonal forces rule our fate, and that all values are relative and hence arbitrary. It is true that life has no meaning, if by that we mean a supreme goal built into the fabric of nature and human experience, a goal that is valid for every individual. But it does not follow that life cannot be given meaning. Much of what we call culture and civilization consists in efforts people have made, generally against overwhelming odds, to create a sense of purpose for themselves and their descendants. It is one thing to recognize that life is by itself meaningless. It is another thing entirely to accept this with resignation. The first fact does not entail the second, any more than the fact that we lack wings prevents us from flying. Just a side note, that is a true statement to a certain extent that life has no meaning, but it is the meaning that we put into it that we value. We're the ones as conscious being creates that meaningfulness. So Bashar talks about that um, in one of his, and it makes sense for me at least. It makes sense. So really, the meaning of life, a lot of people talk about, oh, what's the meaning of life? It's actually pretty simple. The meaning of life is what you put into it, what you create, the value that you create. And also the meaning of life is the soul's continuous evolution uh towards God, to put it simply. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. Where are we now? From the point of view of an individual, it does not matter what the ultimate goal is, provided it is compelling enough to order a lifetime's worth of psychic energy. The challenge might involve the desire to have the best beer bottle collection in the neighborhood, the resolution to find a cure for cancer, or simply the biological imperative to have children who will survive and prosper. As long as it provides clear objectives, clear rules for action, and a way to concentrate and become involved, any goal can serve to give meaning to a person's life. Think I would agree with that. In the past few years, I've come to be quite well acquainted with several Muslim professionals, electronics engineers, pilots, businessmen, and teachers, mostly from Saudi Arabia and from the other Gulf states. In talking to them, I was struck with how relaxed most of them seemed to be, even under strong pressure. There's nothing to it, those I asked about it told me, in different words, but with the same message. We don't get upset because we believe that our life is in God's hands, but and whatever he decides will be fine with us. Such implicit faith used to be widespread in our culture as well, but it is not easy to find it now. Many of us have to discover a goal that will give meaning to life on our own without the help of a traditional faith. And finding meaning, just a side note, finding meaning to life on our own can only take you so far. You have to have that spiritual component at some point, because otherwise in my opinion, you hit a brick wall. And that's what the nihilists like Nietzsche and all that. I remember reading Nietzsche in college, and I remember thinking to myself, why don't this guy kill himself? It was so it was so dark. It's just very dark. And he's taken that darkness in his writings, he's taking that darkness to the extreme. And if you get to that extreme without faith, it just, you might as well just give up. So you have to have faith at some point. And the Bible says faith is the evidence of things unseen. Or I forgot the exact words. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But you're having faith that something that is not seen happens. But I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm probably not making sense. So I should shut up and start reading. Okay. What meaning means? Meaning is a concept difficult to define, since any definition runs the risk of being circular. How do we talk about the meaning of meaning itself? There are three ways in which unpacking the sense of this world helps illuminate the last step in achieving optimal experience. Its first usage points toward the end, purpose, significance of something, as in, what is the meaning of life? I just answered that. Meaning of life. Meaning of life is what you create meaning. You're the one that create the meaning, number one. And number two, it's a soul's continuous evolution towards uh, enlightenment, towards God. That's the meaning of life. There you go. This sense of the word reflects the assumption that events are linked to each other in terms of an ultimate goal, that there is a temporal order, a causal connection between them. It assumes that phenomena are not random, but fall into recognizable patterns directed by a final purpose. The second usage of the word refers to a person's intentions. She usually means well. What this sense of meaning implies is that people reveal the purposes in action. That is true to a certain extent, not always, that their goals are expressed in predictable, consistent, and orderly ways. Finally, the third sense in which the word is used refers to ordering information, as when one says, oh boy, orthohino orthohino in rhino, auto rhino laryngology, laryngology. Okay, I think I got it. Auto rhino laryngology. Oh boy. Means the study of ear, that's auto, nose, that's rhino, rhino, throat, larynx, laryng. Ology is the study. So, okay. Or red sky in the evening means good weather in the morning. This sense of meaning points to the identity of different words, the relationship between events, and thus it helps to clarify, to establish order among unrelated or conflicting information. Creating meaning involves bringing order to the contents of the mind by integrating one's actions into a unified flow experience. The three senses of the word meaning noted above make it clear. Oh, excuse me. I burped my coffee. Make it clearer how this is accomplished. People who find their lives meaningful usually have a goal that is challenging enough to take up all their energies, a goal that can give significance to their lives. We may refer to this process as achieving purpose. To experience flow, one must set goals for one's actions, to win a game, to make friends with a person, to accomplish something in a certain way. The goal in itself is usually not important. What matters is that it focuses a person's attention and involves it in an achievable, enjoyable activity. In a similar way, some people are able to bring the same sharp focus to their psychic energy throughout the entirety of their lives. The unrelated goals of the separate flow activities merge into an all-encompassing set of challenges that gives purpose to everything a person does. There are very different ways to establish this directionality. Napoleon devoted his life and in the process gladly led to death hundreds of thousands of French soldiers to the single-minded pursuit of power. Mother Teresa has invested all her energies to help the helpless because her life has been given purpose by an unconditional love based on the belief in God, in a spiritual order beyond the reach of her senses. From a purely psychological point of view, Napoleon and Mother Teresa may both have achieved equal levels of inner purpose and therefore optimal experience. The obvious differences between them prompt a broader ethical question. What have the consequences of these two ways of giving meaning to life been? We might conclude that Napoleon brought chaos to thousands of lives, whereas Mother Teresa reduced the entropy to the consciousness of many. But here we will not try to pass judgment on the objective value of actions. We will be concerned instead with the more modest task of describing the subjective order that a unified purpose brings to individual consciousness. In this sense, the answer to the old riddle, what is the meaning of life, turns out to be astonishingly simple. The meaning of life is meaning. Whatever it is, wherever it comes from, a unified purpose is what gives meaning to life. The second sense of the word meaning refers to the expression of intentionality. And this sense also is appropriate to the issue of how to create meaning by transforming all life into a flow activity. It is not enough to find a purpose that unifies one's goals. One must also carry through and meet its challenges. The purpose must result in strivings. Intent has to be translated into action. We may call this resolution in the pursuit of one's goals. What counts is not so much whether a person actually achieves what she has set out to do. Rather, it matters whether effort has been expended to reach the goal, instead of being diffused or wasted. When, quote, the native hue of resolution is sicklied or with the pale cast of thought, Hamlet observed, enterprises of great pith and moment lose the name of action. Few things are sadder than encountering a person who knows exactly what he should do, yet cannot muster enough energy to do it. Quote, he who desires but acts not, wrote Blake with his accustomed vigor, breeds pestilence. The third and final way in which life acquires meaning is the result of the previous two steps. When an important goal is pursued with resolution and all one's varied activities fit together into a unified flow experience, the result is that harmony is brought to consciousness. Someone who knows his desires and works with purpose to achieve them is a person whose feelings, thoughts, and actions are congruent with one another, and is therefore a person who has achieved inner harmony. In the 1960s, this process is called, quote, getting your head together. But in practically every other historical period, a similar concept has been used to describe this necessary step toward living a good life. Someone who is in harmony no matter what he does, no matter what is happening to him, knows that his psychic energy is not being wasted on doubt, regret, guilt, and fear, but is always usefully employed. Inner congruence ultimately leads to that inner strength and serenity we admire in people who seem to have come to terms with themselves. Purpose, resolution, and harmony unify life and give it meaning. By transforming it into a seamless flow experience. Whoever achieves this state will never really lack anything else. A person whose consciousness is so ordered need not fear unexpected events or even death. Every living moment will make sense, and most of it will be enjoyable. This certainly sounds desirable. So, how does one attain it? Cultivating purpose. In the lives of many people, it is possible to find a unifying purpose that justifies the things they do day in, day out. A a goal that, like a magnetic field, attracts their psychic energy. A goal upon which all lesser goals depend. This goal will define the challenges that a person needs to face in order to transform his or her life into a flow activity. Without such a purpose, even the best ordered consciousness lacks meaning. Throughout human history, innumerable attempts have been made to discover ultimate goals that would give meaning to experience. These attempts have often been very different from one another. For instance, in the ancient Greek civilization, according to the social philosopher Hannah Arendt, men sought to achieve immortality through heroic deeds, whereas in the Christian world, men and women hope to reach eternal life through saintly deeds. Ultimate goals, in Arendt's opinion, must accommodate the issue of mortality. They must give men and women a purpose that extends beyond the grave. Both immortality and eternity accomplish this, but in very different ways. The Greek heroes performed noble deeds so as to attract the admiration of their peers, expecting that their highly personal acts of bravery would be passed on in songs and stories from generation to generation. Their identity, therefore, would continue to exist in the memory of their descendants. Saints, on the contrary, surrendered individuality so as to merge their thoughts and actions with the will of God, expecting to live forever after in union with Him. The hero and the saint, to the extent that they dedicate the totality of their psychic energy to an all encompassing goal that prescribed a coherent pattern of behavior to follow until death, turn their lives into unified flow experiences. Other members of society ordered their own less exalted actions on these outstanding models, providing a less clear but more or less adequate meaning to their own lives. Every human culture, by definition, contains meaning systems that can serve as the encompassing purpose by which individuals can order their goals. For instance, Pitram Sorokin divided the various epochs of Western civilization into three types, which he believed have alternated with one another for over 25 centuries, sometimes lasting hundreds of years, sometimes just a few decades. He called these the sensate or ideational, ideational, or ideal, ideational, I think. Hmm. And the idealistic phases of culture, and he attempted to demonstrate that in each one a different set of priorities justified the goals of existence. Sensate cultures are integrated around views of reality designed to satisfy the senses. They tend to be Epicurean, utilitarian, concerned primarily with concrete needs. In such cultures, art, religion, philosophy, and everyday behavior glorify and justify goals in terms of tangible experience. According to Sorensen, sensate culture predominated in Europe from about 440 to about 200 BC, with a peak between 420 and 400 BC. It has become dominant once again in the past century or so, at least in the advanced capitalist democracies. People in a sensate culture are not necessarily more materialistic, but they organize their goals and justify their behavior with reference primarily to pleasure and practicality rather than to more abstract principles. The challenges they see are almost exclusively concerned with making life more easy, more comfortable, more pleasant. They tend to identify the good with what feels good and mistrust idealized values. In my opinion, I think there should be a blend of the two: ideology, practicality, and ideology. And if you think about it, that's where the manifestation happens. That's where the magic happens. That's where the alchemy happens, right? Uh, okay, sorry, that was a little sidetrack. Little squirrel there for you. Additional, I think. I'm not familiar with that word. Ideational. Mm. Okay, cultures are organized on a principle opposite from the sensate. They look down on the tangible and strive for non-material, supernatural ends. They emphasize abstract principles, asceticism, and transcendence of material concerns. Art, religion, philosophy, and the justification of everyday behavior tend to be subordinated to the realization of the spiritual order. People turn their attention to religion or ideology and view their challenges not in terms of making life easier, but of reaching inner clarity and conviction. Greece from 600 to 500 BC and Western Europe from 200 BC to AD 400 are the high points of this worldview, according to Sorokin. More recently and disturbing examples might include the Nazi interlude in Germany, the communist regimes in Russia and China, and the Islamic revival in Iran. So there's some footnotes there. I highlighted certain words and phrases. That means there's a footnote in the back. So we're going to be reading that. Okay. So footnote on Hannah Arendt describes the difference between meaning systems built on eternity and immortality in her The Human Condition, 1958. Footnote on Sorokin. Sorokin worked out this classification of cultures in the 4 volumes of his Social and Cultural Dynamics, which appeared in 1937. An abridged single volume with the same title was published in 1962. Sorkin's work has been forgotten almost completely by sociologists, perhaps because of his old-fashioned idealism, perhaps because in the crucial decades of the 1950s and 60s, it was overshadowed by that of his much more theoretically astute colleague at Harvard, Talcott Parsons. It is likely that with time, this enormously wide-ranging and methodologically innovative scholar will receive the recognition he deserves. Hmm. A simple example may illustrate the difference between cultures organized around sensate and ideational principles. In our own as well as in fascist societies, physical fitness is cherished and the beauty of the human body worshipped. But the reasons for doing so are very different. In our sensate culture, the body is cultivated in order to achieve health and pleasure. In an additional culture, the body is valued primarily as a symbol of some abstract principle of metaphysical perfection as associated with the idea of the Aryan race or Roman valor. In a sensate culture, a poster of a handsome youth might produce a sexual response to be used for commercial ends. In an additional culture, the same poster would make an ideological statement and be used for political ends. Of course, at no time does any group of people shape its purpose through only one of these 2 ways of ordering experience to the exclusion of the other. At any given moment, various subtypes and combinations of the sensate and the ideational, I think it's probably pronounced ideational because it comes from ideology, idea. Okay, I'll say ideational. It's not a word I've heard about, but whatever. Um, where am I? At any given moment, various subtypes and combinations of the sensate and the ideational worldview may coexist in the same culture, and even in the consciousness of the same individual. The so-called yuppie lifestyle, for instance, is based primarily on sensate principles, while Bible Belt fundamentalism rests on ideational premises. These 2 forms, in their many variants, coexist somewhat uneasily in our current social system, and either one functioning as a system of goals can help to organize life into a coherent flow activity. Not only cultures, but individuals as well embody these meaning systems in their behavior. Business leaders like Lee Iacocca or H. Ross Perot, Ross Perot, whose lives are ordered by concrete entrepreneurial challenges, often display the best features of the sensate approach to life. The more primitive aspects of the sensate worldview are represented by someone like Hugh Hefner, whose quote Playboy philosophy celebrates the simple minded pursuit of pleasure. Representatives of an unreflective ideational approach include dialogues and mystics who advocate simple transcendental solutions such as blind faith and divine providence. There are, of course, many different permutations and combinations. Televangelists like the Bakers or Jimmy Swaggart publicly exhort their audience to value ideational goals while in private indulging in luxury and sensuality. Occasionally, a culture succeeds in integrating these two ideologically opposed principles into a convincing whole that preserves the advantages of both while neutralizing the advantages of each. Sorokin calls these cultures, quote, idealistic. They combine an acceptance of concrete centric experience with a reverence for spiritual ends. In Western Europe, the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance were classified by Sorensen as being relatively most idealistic, with the higher points reached in the first 2 decades of the 4th century. Needless to say, the idealistic solution seems to be the preferable one, as it avoids the listlessness that is often the keynote of purely materialistic worldviews and the fanatical asceticism that bedevils many ideological systems. Sorensen's example trichotomy is a debatable method of categorizing cultures, but it is useful in illustrating some of the principles by which men and women end up ordering their ultimate goals. The sensate option is always quite popular. It involves responding to concrete challenges and shaping one's life in terms of a flow activity that tends toward material ends. Among its advantages is the fact that the rules are comprehended by everyone and that feedback tends to be clear. The desirability of health, money, power, and sexual satisfaction is seldom controversial, but the ideational option also has its advantages. Metaphysical goals may never be achieved, but then failure is almost impossible to prove. The true believer can always extort feedback to use it as a proof that he has been right, that he is among the chosen. Probably the most satisfying way to unify life into an all encompassing flow activity is through the idealistic mode. But setting challenges that involve the improvement of material conditions while at the same time pursuing spiritual ends is not easy, especially when the culture as a whole is predominantly sensate in character. Another way to describe how individuals order their actions is to focus on the complexity of the challenges they set for themselves rather than on their content. Perhaps what matters most is not whether a person is materialistic or ideational, but how differentiated and integrated are the goals he or she pursues in those areas. As was discussed in the final section of Chapter 2, complexity depends on how well a system develops its unique traits and potentialities, and on how well related these traits are to each other. In that respect, a well thought out sensate approach to life, one that is responsive to a great variety of concrete human experiences and was internally consistent, would be preferable to an unreflective idealism and vice versa. There is a consensus among psychologists who study such subjects that people develop the concepts of who they are and of what they want to achieve in life according to a sequence of steps. Each man or woman starts with a need to preserve the self, to keep the body and its basic goals from disintegrating. At this point, the meaning of life is simple. It is tantamount to survival, comfort, and pleasure. When the safety of the physical self is no longer in doubt, the person may expand the horizon of his or her meaning system to embrace the values of a community, the family, the neighborhood, a religious or ethnic group. This step leads to a greater complexity of the self. even though it usually implies conformity to conventional norms and standards. The next step in development involves reflective individualism. The person again turns inward, finding new grounds for authority and value within the self. He or she is no longer blindly conforming, but develops an autonomous conscience. At this point, the main goal in life becomes the desire for growth, improvement, the actualization of potential. The fourth step, which builds on all the previous ones, is a final turning away from the self, back toward an integration with other people and with universal values. In this final stage, the extremely individualized person, like Siddhartha letting the river take control of his boat, willingly merges his interests with those of larger whole. And just a side note, what the author is describing was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow, Maslo, I think it was Maslow's hierarchy of need. He was a psychologist. I think the 20th century, I don't remember now. It's been a long time. Uh, anyways, he maps out, you know, people have to, just a little side note here. His theory was, people have to um, work on the physical survival first, and then you can go up the scale to the emotional satisfaction, work on the emotion, and then work on all the way up to self-actualization. I'm not explaining it very well, but that was the paragraph that what we were reading talks about is a description about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anyways, you can find it on Google. In this scenario, building a complex meaning system seems to involve focusing attention alternately on the self and on the other. First, psychic energy is invested in the needs of the organism, and psychic order is equivalent to pleasure. When this level is temporarily achieved and the person can begin to invest attention in the goals of a community, what is meaningful corresponds to group values. Religion, patriotism, and the acceptance and respect of other people provide the parameters of inner order. The next movement of the dialectic brings attention back to the self. Having achieved a sense of belonging to a larger human system, the person now feels the challenge of discerning the limits of potential, of personal potential. This leads to attempts at self-actualization, to experimentation with different skills, different ideas, and disciplines. At this stage, enjoyment rather than pleasure becomes the main source of rewards. But because this phase involves becoming a seeker, the person may also encounter a midlife crisis, a career change, and an increasingly desperate straining against the limitations of individual capability. From this point on, the person is ready. From this point on, the person is ready for the last shift in the redirection of energy. Having discovered what one can and, more important, cannot do alone, the ultimate goal merges with a system larger than the person, a cause, an idea, a transcendental entity. Not everyone moves through the stages of the spiral of ascending complexity. A few never have the opportunity to go beyond the first step. When survival demands are so insistent that a person cannot devote much attention to anything else, he or she will not have enough psychic energy left to invest in the goals of the family or of the wider community. War does that. War keeps you in the fight flight mode all the time, in their survival mode all the time, so that you don't have the energy or the time or the um, ability to uh, think about family, think about emotion, think about God, right? Self-interest alone will give meaning to life. The majority of people are probably ensconced comfortably in the second stage of development, where the welfare of the family or the company or the community or the nation are the sources of meaning. Many fewer reach the third level of reflective individualism, and only a precious few emerge once again to forge a unity within universal values. So these stages do not necessarily reflect what does happen, but what will happen. They characterize what can happen if a person is lucky and succeeds in controlling consciousness. Okay, there's a couple of footnotes there for us to read. So let me read that. Okay. Footnote on sequences in the development of the self. Very similar theories of stages of development that alternate between attention focused on the self and attention focused primarily on the social environment were developed by Erikson, 1950, who believed that adults had to develop a sense of identity, then intimacy, then generativity, and finally reach a stage of integrity. By Maslow. Oh, that's the guy I was talking about, Maslow. Oh, 54. Okay. So he was 20th century. By Maslow, 1954, whose hierarchy of needs led from physiological safety needs to self-actualization through love and belongingness. By Kohlberg, 1984, who claimed that moral development started from a sense of right and wrong based on self-interest and ended with ethics based on universal principles. And by Loevinger, 1976, who saw ego development proceed from impulsive self-protective action to a sense of integration with the environment. Helen B., 1987, especially chapters 10 and 13, gives a good summary of these and other spiraling models of development. Hmm, okay. In this, okay, just want to make sure I am where I'm supposed to be. So I want to make sure I got the right paragraph here. I don't remember what I read. Okay, I think I read this paragraph here. Okay, I think I got it. All right, here we go. The four stages outlined above are the simplest of the models for describing the emergence of meaning along a gradient of complexity. Other models detail 6 or even 8 stages. The number of steps is irrelevant. What counts is that most theories recognize the importance, oops, sorry, of this dialectic tension, this alternation between differentiation on the one hand and integration on the other. From this point of view, individual life appears to consist of a series of different games with different goals and challenges that change with time as a person matures. Complexity requires that we invest energy in developing whatever skills we were born with and becoming autonomous, self-reliant, conscious of our uniqueness and of its limitations. At the same time, we must invest energy in recognizing, understanding, and finding ways to adapt to the forces beyond the boundaries of our own individuality. Of course, we don't have to undertake any of these plans, but if we don't, chances are sooner or later we will regret it. Forging resolve. Purpose gives direction to one's efforts, but it does not necessarily make life easy. Oh, excuse me, I burped again. But it does not necessarily make life easier. Goals can lead into all sorts of trouble, at which point one gets tempted to give them up and find some less demanding script by which to order one's actions. The price one pays for changing goals whenever opposition threatens is that while one may achieve a more pleasant and comfortable life, it is likely that it will end up empty and void of meaning. The pilgrims who first settled this country decided that the freedom to worship according to their conscience was necessary to maintain the integrity of their selves. They believed that nothing mattered more than maintaining control over their relationship with the Supreme Being. Theirs was not a novel choice for an ultimate goal by which to order one's life. Many other people had done so previously. What distinguished the pilgrims was that, like the Jews of Masada, The Christian martyrs, the Cathars of southern France in the late Middle Ages, who had chosen similarly, they did not allow persecution and hardship to blunt their resolve. Instead, they followed the logic of their convictions wherever it led, acting as if their values were worth giving up comfort and even life itself for. And because they acted thus, their goals in fact became worthwhile, regardless of whether they had been originally valuable. Because their goals had become valuable through commitment, they helped give meaning to the pilgrim's existence. No goal can have much effect unless taken seriously. Each goal prescribes a set of consequences, and if one isn't prepared to reckon with them, the goal becomes meaningless. The mountaineer who decides to scale a different peak knows that he will be exhausted and endangered for most of the climb. But if he gives up too easily, his quest will be revealed as having little value. The same is true of all flow experiences. There is a mutual relationship between goals and the efforts they require. Goals justify the effort they demand at the outset, but later it is the effort that justifies the goal. One gets married because the spouse seems worthy of sharing one's life with, but unless one then behaves as if this is true, the partnership will appear to lose value with time. All things considered, it cannot be said that humankind has lacked the courage to back its resolutions. Billions of parents in every age and in every culture have sacrificed themselves for their children and thereby made life more meaningful for themselves. Probably as many have devoted all their energies to preserving their fields and their flocks. Millions more have surrendered everything for the sake of their religion, their country, or their art. For those who have done so consistently despite pain and failure, life as a whole has a chance to become like an extended episode of flow, a focused, concentrated, internally coherent, logically ordered set of experiences which, because of its inner order, was felt to be meaningful and enjoyable. But as the complexity of culture evolves, it becomes more difficult to achieve this degree of total resolve. There are simply too many goals competing for prominence, and who is to say which one is worth the dedication of entire life? Just a few decades ago, a woman felt perfectly justified in placing the welfare of her family as her ultimate goal. Partly this was due to the fact that she did not have many other options. Today, now that she can be a business person, a scholar, an artist, or even a soldier, it is no longer, quote, obvious that being a wife, a mother, should be a woman's first priority. The same embarrassment of riches affects us all. Mobility has freed us from ties to our birthplaces. There is no longer any reason to become involved in one's native community, to identify with one's place of birth. If the grass looks greener across the fence, we simply move to the other field. How about opening that little restaurant in Australia? Lifestyles and religions are choices that are easily switched. In the past, a hunter was a hunter until he died. A blacksmith spent his life perfecting his craft. We can now shed our occupational identities at will. No one needs to remain an accountant forever. The wealth of options we face today has extended personal freedom to an extent that would have been inconceivable even 100 years ago. But the inevitable consequence of equally attractive choices is uncertainty of purpose. Uncertainty, in turn, saps resolution, and lack of resolve ends up devaluing choice. Therefore, freedom does not necessarily help develop meaning in life. On the contrary, if the rules of a game become too flexible, concentration flags, and it is more difficult to attain a flow experience. Commitment to a goal and to the rules it entails is much easier when the choices are few and clear. It is not to imply that a return to the rigid rules, this is not to imply that a return to the rigid values and limited choices of the past would be preferable, even if that were a possibility, which it is not. The complexity and freedom that have been thrust upon us and that our ancestors have fought so hard to achieve are a challenge we must find ways to master. If we do, the lives of our descendants will be infinitely more enriched than anything previously experienced on this planet. If we do not, we run the risk of frittering away our energies on contrary, meaningless goals. But in the meantime, how do we know where to invest psychic energy? There is no one out there to tell us, quote, here is a goal worth spending your life on. Because there is no absolute certainty to which to turn, each person must discover ultimate purpose on his or her own. Through trial and error, through intense cultivation, we can straighten out the tangled skin of conflicting goals and choose the one that will give purpose to action. Self-knowledge, an ancient remedy so old that its value is easily forgotten, is the process through which one may organize conflicting options. Quote, know thyself was carved over the entrance to the Delphic oracle, and ever since untold pious epigrams have extolled its value. The reason the advice is so often repeated is that it works. We need, however, to rediscover afresh every generation what these words mean, what the advice actually implies for each individual. And to do that, it is useful to express it in terms of current knowledge and envision a contemporary method for its application. Inner conflict is the result of competing claims on attention. Too many desires, too many incompatible goals struggle to marshal psychic energy toward their own ends. It follows that the only way to reduce conflict is by sorting out the essential claims from those that are not, and by arbitrating priorities among those that remain. There are basically two ways to accomplish this: what the ancients called the vita activa, a life of action, and the vita contemplativa, or the path of reflection. And there's a footnote about that, so let's read it. So the footnote on vita activa and vita contemplavita. These Aristotelian terms are extensively used by Thomas Aquinas in his analysis of the good life, and by Hannah Arendt, 1958. Okay. Immersed in the vita activa, a person achieves flow through total involvement in concrete external challenges. Many great leaders like Winston Churchill or Andrew Carnegie, sometimes pronounced Carnegie, set for themselves lifelong goals that they pursued with great resolve without any apparent internal struggle or questioning of priorities. Successful executives, experienced professionals, and talented craftspeople learn to trust their judgment and competence so that they again begin to act with the unself-conscious spontaneity of children. If the arena for action is challenging enough, a person may experience flow continuously in his or her calling, thus leaving as little room as possible for noticing the entropy of normal life. In this way, harmony is restored to consciousness indirectly, not by facing up to contradictions and trying to resolve conflicting goals and desires, but by pursuing chosen goals with such intensity that all potential competition is preempted. Action helps create inner order, but it has its drawbacks. A person strongly dedicated to achieving pragmatic ends might eliminate internal conflict, but often at the price of excessively restricting options. The young engineer who aims to become plant manager at age 45 and bends all his energies to that end may sail through several years successfully without hesitation. Sooner or later, however, postponed alternatives may reappear again as intolerable doubts and regrets. Was it worth sacrificing my health for the promotion? What happened to those lovely children who have suddenly turned into sullen adolescents? Now that I have achieved power and financial security, what do I do with it? In other words, the goals that have sustained action over a period turned out not to have enough power to give meaning to the entirety of life. And it's interesting because just a side note, I was thinking, what do like his question here, now that I've achieved power and financial security, what do I do with it? My first thought was to give it away. That's what the Buddhist monks in Tibet does with the beautiful, I forgot what they call it, but the artwork that they do with those little colorful sands, they would work on it hours and hours and days at a time, and then they would just wipe it all off, um, and start over. And that's what my teacher says, you want to work the process, but then at the end of the process, you want to just wipe it clean and give it a clean slate and start all over because you might come to a different conclusion the second time or see something different. And a lot of us uh instinctively would say, oh my gosh, don't 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 wipe it off, don't destroy it, you got to save it, preserve it. But you know I don't know. Interesting concept. Yeah, there's a certain cataclysmic emotional release, I think, when you wipe away, like you start over with a clean slate from an energetic level, like you're purging a lot of the energy and allowing new energy to come in. I don't know if that makes any sense, but anyways, that was what I was thinking about when the author asked that question about the money and the power. What do I do with it after accumulating all that? So anyways, the little squirrel there, squirrel moment. All right, continuing. This is where the presumed advantage of a contemplative life comes in. Detached reflection upon experience, a realistic weighing of options and their consequences, have long been held to be the best approach to a good life. Whether it is played out on the psychoanalyst couch, where repressed desires are laboriously reintegrated with the rest of consciousness, or whether it is performed as methodically as the Jesuits' test of conscience, which involves reviewing one's actions one or more times each day to check whether what one has been doing in the past few hours has been consistent with long-term goals. Self-knowledge can be pursued in innumerable ways, each leading potentially to greater inner harmony. And there's a footnote on Jesuits, so let's read that. A description of how the Jesuit rules help create order in the consciousness of those who follow them is given in Isabella C. Well, I can't call him Mr. C. It's a she, so I'll call Miss C. Ms. C. Isabella C. 1986, 1988, and Marco Toscano, 1986. Activity and reflection should ideally complement and support each other. Action by itself is blind, reflection impotent. Before investing great amounts of energy in a goal, it pays to raise the fundamental questions. Is this something I really want to do? Is it something I enjoy doing? Am I likely to enjoy it in the foreseeable future? Is the price that I and others will have to pay worth it? Will I be able to live with myself if I accomplish it? These seemingly easy questions are almost impossible to answer for someone who has lost touch with his own experience. If a man has not bothered to find out what he wants, if his attention is so wrapped up in external goals that he fails to notice his own feelings, then he cannot plan action meaningfully. On the other hand, if the habit of reflection is well developed, a person need not go through a lot of soul searching to decide whether a course of action is entropic or not. He will know almost intuitively that this promotion will produce more stress than it is worth, and that this particular friendship, attractive as it is, would lead to unacceptable tensions in the context of marriage. It is relatively easy to bring order to the mind for short stretches of time. Any realistic goal can accomplish this. A good game, an emergency at work, a happy interlude at home will focus attention and produce the harmonious experience flow. But it is much more difficult to extend this state of being through the entirety of life. For this, it is necessary to invest energy in goals that are so persuasive that they justify effort even when our resources are exhausted, and when fate is merciless in refusing us a chance at giving or at having a comfortable life. If goals are well chosen, and if we have the courage to abide by them despite opposition, we shall be so focused on the actions and events around us that we won't have the time to be unhappy. And then we shall directly feel a sense of order in the warp and the woof of life that fits every thought and emotion into a harmonious whole. Wow. Okay, we'll stop here for now. That was a long couple sections there. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and we will continue our part 2 next time. And in the meantime, like I said, check out our other book clubs, our newsletters, sign up for our newsletters, and we have podcasts and merch. Check them out and come visit us at our healing center when if you're visiting us in LA area, or if you're here locally, come visit us. So anyways, I hope you have a great day, and we will see you next time. All right, bye-bye now.